Please let me explain. You know, writing what happens? We continue with the labor market. So, in the previous class, we talked about individual labor supply. We simply talked about you seeking unemployment or me seeking for unemployment. But today, we want to talk about the labor supply to a firm or industry. So, how many people are willing to employ, are willing to seek for employment within a firm or industry? That is labor supply to a firm or industry. It's different from an individual labor supply. Though the graph is the same. The higher the wage rate, the higher the number of workers willing to work. Same goes to the supply of labor to the firm or to the industry. If a firm is paying more, workers will be willing to work in such a firm. If an industry is paying more, workers will be willing to work in such industry. That is the point here. So it is always upward slope. Do you get the point I'm making? Great. So labor supply to a firm or industry. This applies to the sum of individual of all workers employed in a firm or industry. So the sum of all workers employed in an industry, that is the labor supply to a firm or to industry. Not individual, the sum of the individuals that have been employed by that firm is labor supply to the industry or to the firm. Do you get that, please? So the supply curve of labor to a firm or industry is upward slope, which simply means it responds to a change in the wage rate. So the higher the wage rate, the higher the numbers of workers making themselves available for job. So this implies that labor supply increases with the wage rates offered. So it is based on the reward for labor. So the reward for labor will determine how much more people are willing and able to offer their service for the job in a firm or in the industry. So the extent to which labor supply responds to a change in wage rate is elasticity. So irrespective of what the wage rate is, it can either be inelastic or elastic, which simply means there's always going to be response from workers to a raise or to a rise or to an increase in the wage rate. So as soon as the wage rate increases, it is expected that the supply of labor responds to this. So the response to this will be based on elasticity. And what is elasticity? The degree of responsiveness between the change in wage rate and the numbers of workers making themselves available. That is elasticity. Do you understand elasticity here? Yes. The responsiveness between a change in the wage rate to the numbers of workers making themselves available for job. So that takes us to the factors that determines the elasticity. Elasticity is a situation. But what are those things that determine how elastic or inelastic the supply of labor could be? So it is not only wage rate that determines if people are willing to work or not, because there are other factors attached to your ability to work. Yeah, you might wish to work, but if the job requires certain skills that you don't have, irrespective of the wage rate, you won't still have that job. Is it making sense or not? So that takes us to the factors that bring about elasticity in the supply of labor. The first one is the skills. Skills are what you can offer, your human capital, what you can offer. So if in a particular industry, the wage rate is increasing and the required skills you don't have, you can't still have a job. So the supply of labor will not still increase. You can't still make yourself available because you don't have the skill required. Do we get what I'm saying?
Yes.
So the extent to which the skills required will determine the labor supply. So here I wrote, the skills required to carry out a particular occupation may determine the elasticity of supply of labor. An occupation that requires more skills to carry out will have an inelastic supply of labor.
This is why government investment in education is very impactful in the long term.
Yeah.
Because to increase the amount of laborers that are available to
the economy.
To high skill firms, yeah.
So education, we're going to go to education actually anyway, but before that, we're talking about skills. So the required skills, if the skills required in a certain industry or occupation is high, it simply means the supply of labor in such occupation will be what? Less. So it means inelastic. So irrespective of the wage rate. So an occupation or industry that requires more skills to get engaged with, the supply of labor will be what? Inelastic, which simply means there's not going to be significant change in the quantity supply of labor as a result of a change in the wage rate, based on the fact that the skills require, the occupation or the industry requires more skills. Just like teaching. For you to teach, you would have finished at least a university degree. So, and that takes 4 years. Yes or no? Or probably even football. Not everybody could play football because the skills required are different. You need to get to a certain level before you could be accepted or requested or from a football club. So if the skills needed to carry out a particular job is high, then the supply of labor for such job will be inelastic based on the wage rate. So irrespective of the wage rate, people will still not be available to do the job because they don't have the ability to do the job. Remember, the supply of labor is the willingness and the ability of workers to make themselves available for job. So for you to qualify for that job, there are specific skills needed. So if you don't have that skill, or if you don't possess such skill, you won't still be able to get the job, irrespective of the wage rate. That's about skills. Any question about skills? So for skills, how do you add more skills? You could add more skills through education and training. Because training brings about the ability to learn what you don't know. So it increases your level, your knowledge, your know-how. But if what is required, you don't have it, you can't still have a job. That's about skills. But the solution for skills, how to solve skills, is about you making yourself available for education and training. Then the next one is the level of education and training. If the level of education required for a particular job or industry is high, it simply means the supply of labor will be what? Inelastic. Because you need to have certain educational level before you get the job. So if you don't have that educational level, you won't still get the job. That's education and training. Do you understand education and training? And that is where you come in, that you talked about government investing in education and training. If government is able to invest in education and training, it improves the human capital of the whole economy, and that increases productivity. So that's about education and training. So how is it elastic and inelastic? It is elastic here because the supply. Okay, now the last one I wrote is about. Yeah, I said okay, a job that requires no level of education. So like maybe cleaning, there are some jobs that you don't need that level of education for. Those jobs, the supply is always what? More if the wage rate increases. Because it requires low level of skills, low level of education. So the supply of labor will be high. Do you get it? So if it is elastic, this is the graph for elastic, and this is inelastic. So according to the wage rate, if the wage rate increases, if the level of education is high, if the skills required is high, the supply of labor will be inelastic. But if the wage rate is increasing and the level of education required is low and the level of skills needed is less, it will be what? Elastic. Do you understand elastic and elastic? Yes. Thank you. Stop here.